Hi there, and welcome back to the Community Strategy Podcast. My name is Deb Shell. I'm a creator turned community builder. After launching my online community in 2020, I have a passion for online events and bringing people together. I now consult business owners and leaders just like yourself who have a message, their life's work, or a vision for helping others transform through their online courses, cohorts, or memberships. On this interview style podcast, you'll hear conversations with community leaders, passion for bringing people together online. Our goal is to provide you with interesting conversations to inspire you to build, launch, and grow an online community with energy, confidence, and purpose. Let's get started. Community Strategy Podcast. Super excited today to have a special guest here, Pablo Gonzalez. He has been a leader in the community space for quite some time and is really active about reaching out and making friends at conferences across the US. And I don't even know if you've hit some international conferences, Pablo, but welcome to the Community Strategy Podcast.
No, not yet. I'm still looking forward to making international friends. I really started going hard at this thing like 2019, right? So the conference thing is I'm happy it just opened back up, and I'm in like, full tour right now. I got like 4 different ones in September and like 2 in October and 2 in November. So it should be fun. Thanks for having me, Deb. I'm really pumped to be here. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm talking about myself. I appreciate you sharing your stage with me. I love the fact that we're having this conversation. So excited for your show, and I'm excited to be here. So how can we start?
Thank you. You got it. Well, I was at Issar is in the room and Missy's in the room on this is our last live session with the Find Calm Here community, because we're actually closing the Find Calm Here community in September. And I'm switching to recorded podcast episodes just for myself to find a little bit more calm in my life in a lot of ways. And but I met Issar, and this is how I kind of got into meeting with Pablo. Is Issar is on the call too, and I met him at another conference called the Community Leaders Institute, and he was sharing. Pablo was supposed to be there, I'm pretty sure, but like something happened with the plane or something, and you didn't make it. But luckily, I decided to go to PodFest in Orlando, and I met you there with your these. So tell everybody a little bit about you. We'll start there. Like, why do you go to all these conferences? What's the deal with that? Let's start with that.
I mean, Deb, I think that relationships are the atomic unit of business, right? So if you're not out building relationships and doing that thing as an input to whatever you are passionate about, you're missing the point. And for me, so a couple of things, right? Like one, in early 2019, when I decided that I wanted to build a business, I heard this idea that if you're going to build a business around anything other than the thing that you love doing, that you think you're really, really good at, being your activity in the business and being the thing that drives the business, if you're doing anything other than that, go get a job. Right. So in my head, I'm like, man, what I love to do is make friends with people and meet people. And I think my superpower is that I fall in love with everyone I meet, and I'm a good communicator. So it makes me a great connector and a hype man. So a business where me being able to go to conferences and do this thing is something that I had to build. And strategically, on a more tactical level, the conferences that you and I have seen each other at, I believe that conferences of content creators is a very high ROI use of your relationship building time, right? Because I can go to any conference and make 30 friends, and then I'm gonna have to keep up with them, right? But if you go to a content creator conference, everybody is really fascinating, right? Like everybody really cares deeply about something and knows how to talk about it and knows how to get into it and is real passionate. So it's these wonderful people that have this skill set that I think is the new art of communication, which is content creation. And everybody you meet, if you meet 30 people and 5 of them have you on your show, then really you just met 1,500 people, right? So it's going to these content creator conferences is a very scalable relationship building technique. And all I ever think about is how to build relationships based on that understanding that relationships are the atomic unit of business. So that's how it fits in.
You probably have communication and I would say relator in your top 5 strengths, I would guess. Maybe even winning others over, because I feel like that's another one that resonates with you. It's funny that you said like you love everybody. I'm curious if that's true. Like, do you really love everybody that you meet at these conferences?
I fall in love really easily, Deb. Like I fall
would
in love
challenge you
very,
there.
very easily. Like I don't know if I love everybody, right? But I really do. Just I there's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson that is, in my journeys, every man I meet is in some way my superior, and in that I can learn from them. I just very much take that to heart. And you said this idea of like getting people to, what was that strength that you said of like getting buy-in or getting people to like you?
Winning others over is in my top 5, which is like persuasive, being able to communicate persuasively with people and get them on board with an idea pretty quickly.
Yeah. And really, Deb, what that really comes down to is not really winning people over about me. It's winning people over about themselves. Like I think that in my, like, through my early 30s, everything was like, how can I be the coolest guy in the room? And at one point I got really involved in nonprofits and I started networking with people that were way above my stratosphere in their career trajectory. And it was clear that there's no way that I could be the coolest person in the room because they did not care about my little Ace Ventura jokes. And at that point, my mind flipped and it became all about how can I make the person in front of me feel like they are the most important person in the room. And again, that comes down to that idea that I see something wonderful in everyone I meet, and I'm a good communicator. So I know how to make you feel special about what you do. And I know how to describe it to the person next to you. Like, oh my God, Deb is this fascinating person. She was a journalist and now she's a community strategist. And like, it makes perfect sense because asking questions is like how you get to know people and how you get to show value, right? Like I just get it when I see people, and then I'm not shy about communicating it, and it works out.
Thank you. And thank you for that shout out. That's literally, we worked together during, we did a boot camp. So once I met Sarah, he told me about this boot camp he was doing. I joined the boot camp and got to know you a little bit better. And then we hung out at Podfest and watched you do some karaoke, which was pretty cool. But really this whole concept that you've got around being the stage and how you work with clients, tell us a little bit about that transition from, okay, I want to go meet people, to like, how does that return on your time investment? As in, like, are you getting clients from these people that you're meeting, or is it just like the podcast guesting, or how are you going to a conference and then approaching it with like, I need to get X amount of clients? Is there a strategy to it, or is it just pure, I want to build relationships and then see where things happen?
Great question. And nobody's ever really given me the opportunity to explain this, right? But again, going back to this idea of building a business around my strengths, I am a world-class opener and a very mediocre closer, right? So like I know how to get it started. And then what I realized early on was that my first kind of content creation, thought leadership stuff was about networking. And one of the questions I got very often about networking was, how do I follow up, right? Like, how do you go to all these conferences? How are you following up with people? And I suck at that, right? So what I really do is I very much lean into the first impression, and like when you're in front of me, making you feel really, really special. And then I very much lean into content creation, because the frictionless way to follow up with you, and somebody literally just asked me this last night. He's like, hey man, I noticed you don't carry cards and you're just connecting with people on social media. And I'm like, yeah, man, because I'm not the dude that's going to get your card and then email you 2 weeks later, like, oh, hey, let's follow up and have a coffee. I'm the guy that's going to connect with you, make friends with you. You know, what we talk about is going to be valuable to you, because I'm going to give you all my best advice based on the 15, years of like meeting people and trying to figure out what works for them. And I'm good at cross-contextualizing stuff. And then I'm going to connect with you on whatever social media of choice that you spend time on. And oh, by the way, I post 2 to 3 times a day on every single social media channel. So like if you met me at a conference, you are now going to see me in your feed at least once a week. So the moment that you need a Pablo in your life, you're going to be like, oh, I know exactly where to find that dude, because he pops up regularly in the thing that I spend the most time on, which is looking at my phone, like all other people do.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, just to say that that's your connector strength. Right? As a community builder, one of the biggest strengths that community builders usually all have and community leaders have is that they love connecting with each other and with other people to each other. So you just mentioned earlier, like, you know a little bit about me. So when you go to these conferences, if they are mentioning something about something that reminds you of me, oh my gosh, you should meet Deb because she X, Y, or Z does this thing. Versus and you do that at the conference for other people. So you say, oh, I just was talking 5 minutes ago to Missy and she has this amazing thing going on. You should talk with her. And I think that's the key to being a really great host in a in-person space, is being able to make people feel seen, be able to make them feel heard, and to feel like they're valuable and important. And that powerful moment that you give those people in that moment makes them feel very special. And like you're saying, then they will always remember you as the person who made them feel really important or valued or heard. And so that way they can then, oh, Pablo was this, he has this show or he's doing this thing, and they can relate back to you as well. So it's more about that instant creating the ripple effect later, right? About how you create that relationship bond within just a few minutes. And in person, you can do this, and online, you can do this as well. And it's a powerful thing that I think a lot of creators and community builders all feel that's important, and recognize that it's valuable, instead of going up to somebody. This is what happened to me recently, is I'm going to more networking in-person events and Chamber of Commerce, because I joined the Chamber of Commerce, and it's very transactional. And I've just had a conversation with this lady yesterday about, there's just certain groups that you just know that there's going to be the people there that hand you the business card, give their 20-second, 30-second elevator pitch or whatever it is, and then be like, okay, nice to meet you, see you later. Unless it's like going to be something where it's a possible client or customer or something. And I think what we're talking about is the opposite of that.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things that I want to dig into there, right? Like, Deb, you're clearly an awesome community strategist, because you realize the fact that the exercise of community building is really just an exercise in identifying the value of the individual in the community and figuring out how that value can be shared with the other person in the community that is seeking that value. The better you get at identifying value and sharing value, the more you're going to build a community. Within all of that, as the leader of a community or as a part of a community, your value is going to be shared as well. But you have to recognize that if you're going for this play, you're going for this community play, that's the move. How do you identify, sources of value within your community and connect it with inputs that need that source of value, right? So, like, very well said. And to your point of the Chamber of Commerce networking event, I cut my teeth on that, right? Like, you were a journalist. I'm sure you went to tons of that stuff. I've been doing, my experience in community creation came from building young professional nonprofit groups in Miami. And that was a ton of Chamber of Commerce, a ton of economic development agency, a ton of banquets and whatnot. And what I see that the life cycle there is the younger, less seasoned business developers, right? Those rooms, stop me if I'm wrong here, commercial realtor, insurance broker, commercial banker, right? Like it's
financial advisor,
financial advisor, right? Like, just full of those folks. People that do well in those careers are the ones that you're going to meet a lot of, like the business card sprayers there, but those are not the top 1% of their careers. The top 1% of their career, you meet them in a networking environment, and they're immediately engaging in you. What are your priorities? What are you seeking? What's the key to your business, right? Like, what makes you successful? And they're indexing for that and who they can connect you to, because they understand that at these events, it's all about that. It's all about, like, oh, okay, this is what's going to help you. I know someone that can get you there. And if I can make that intro, then I'm completely different than these, like, business card sprayers that are just, like, trying to figure out what you do and what I do. And is there a transaction? No, next.
Right. Exactly. Love that. So great. So tell us a little bit about what you do, how you work with clients. I know I learned in the boot camp a little bit about your process. So talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
I hope you learned more than a little bit about our process in the boot camp, but you learned the whole process, right? To your point, right? So we are the company's called Be the Stage because we believe that it is much more powerful to be the stage than the star of the stage, right? Like in another word, it's much more powerful to be a kingmaker than to be a king, right? Everybody that's trying to be excellent and be a king, if you pose yourself as a king, you're a threat and they are going to compete with you. If you pose yourself as the kingmaker, they're going to want to get close to you, right? And you start developing this network. And, what we specialize in is creating community through content strategies. And for us, when you have a group of people and you're trying to like congeal them into a community, the first thing that you're thinking about is, how do I get this thing started? How do I get everybody in a room? And once you get past that point and you get everybody in a room, the next thing that you got to think about is, okay, how do I keep them coming back to this room? And how do I keep them talking when I'm in this room? And what we realized, I've reverse engineered all this process from what we were doing for young professionals in like 2010. But what we realized is like a very easy method of getting somebody to re-show up to a room and continue to contribute to the conversation is to make sure that in that room, you are having a conversation about something that they want to learn about with somebody that they want to meet. People tend to show up for that. So we specialize in producing these internet talk shows that service that, right? It's a webinar, but you run it as an internet talk show where you are building a relationship with somebody that the people that you serve, admire or want to meet or want to get to know, and you get to be guilty by association with that person and develop a strategic relationship, while folks that show up to the call, show up to the webinar, show up to the show also get to be a part of it. They get to ask questions. It's kind of like a panel at one of these conferences or in the Chamber of Commerce that's interactive. And when you're doing that, you're building these you're driving these 4 vectors of relationship between you and your guest, you and your audience, your guest and your audience, and audience to audience. And then you're taking that content and repurposing it into podcasts, YouTube, social media, all these different things. And the more you do that, the more you realize that people will start showing up, same people will start showing up, and slowly but surely there's a cadence where you start to get 6 people that show up to every call, then 10 people that show up to call, then 15. And really by the time that you have 6 people showing up to every call, then that 7th and 8th person that shows up, one of those 2 stick around because they're like, oh, this is real. And now that, that space that you opened up for your community now has an ongoing conversation that can always reflect, right? Communities all have rituals and all have shared language, and generally we'll have a stage where that stuff gets disseminated. And what we do is design that stage for you so that you have that ongoing conversation, you have that feeder system into the community, and that ability to, we call it frictionless nurture, right? To be able to grow these relationships very, very efficiently, because you're not just interviewing one person, you're interviewing a person in front of a bunch of other people and creating this multi-vector relationship driving conversation.
Yeah, that's why I really, when Sarah was talking about this at CM or the Clicks event, I was like, this is great, because it's the perfect combination to me of podcasting and community building all rolled up in one, is what I felt like when I learned about the program, because I was like, how great could it be to bring guests that not only your podcast listeners want to hear, but maybe people in your community, if you're leading an online community. And I considered it to be a great community structure that could build habit and keep people coming back because the biggest challenges I see for clients that I work with is, first the clarity piece of okay, who are we bringing together, why, and what are we doing? And then once they've got that clarity piece figured out, then it's okay, well, like you're saying, how do we get them to keep coming back? And it's these rituals and programs that we lead over time that people say, oh, this is a valuable space. I've had people come on to calls and be like, I didn't, after they'd say to me later, I didn't realize how valuable that call was going to be. I was just thinking it was laughing and, I'll show up and see how it goes. And I thought, I got a lot more value than I expected out of that. And I think that's what happens when you have this conversation with you interviewing somebody, asking some really interesting questions, because you've got some people behind the scenes helping you recruit some of these people. You've built a network for yourself with the experience and background you have in the community industry to be able to leverage these higher, potential really great leaders in industry and community come onto your show. And then you even offer, by elevating these members that are a part of the community that show up and when we say community for Pablo, it's talking about the Zoom call that he has once a week.
Yeah, people in the Zoom chat. Yeah.
It's just the Zoom chat. So like, it's not a whole full-blown platform. And what they realized quickly, correct me if I'm wrong, Pablo, but that was the method to success for you, was just keeping it really short, simple, and then, telling them in their email to just come back each week. And there's just people that show up every week now on your Monday call.
Yeah, that's 100% it, right? And at once you get a certain core capacity, that's when you bring in an expert like yourself that can like design the space and move the conversation offline. But I think what people don't realize is that you don't need to have a huge following. You don't need to have 1,000 people in a group to call it a community, right? I would say my community probably has about 25 people that I consider real active members of my community. Of those, I probably get like 9 to 12 of those on every single one of my shows, and other ones that come every so often. But they're out there posting on LinkedIn about stuff that they learned on the show, tagging the other person that they learned it from. And that like web effect really, really works, which is the same exact thing we did to, build our first community as a service for JWB Real Estate Capital, where we did the same exact thing. By the end of year one, they attributed $40 million worth of revenue to it. And when we looked back, when Isar had Greg, who's our client on his podcast, Greg made the big distinction that was like, listen, man, we've looked at these numbers and we realized that while, we've produced 100 shows and we get 60, they do like 2 calls a week. They do 2 shows a week that get like 45 to 65 people. So it's like 100 plus people per week. But they traced back the idea that the profitability of this like $40 million revenue stream can be traced back to the 25 people that show up every week, right? Like those 25 people were the ones that bought back in, started reinvesting in them, then were like telling the rest of the people in the community, like, yeah, I'm in on this. Like, why aren't you doing this? And it became a competition. They're the ones that become like the people that when someone shows up to a Zoom call and they're asking a question that we can't handle on the show, they're like, oh, hey, I got the answer for you. And they're typing it in. And then they're saying, here's my number if you want to talk about how to use your self-directed IRA to buy rental property, right? Like that stuff is happening every single week in that call. And it doesn't take a big army to just have, a group of ambassadors that become your super consumers that then become this like really valuable asset. Cause the author of Super Consumers, Eddie Yoon, right? Like I have that book somewhere around my head here. The author of Super Consumers, which is a fascinating concept, talks about it all the time. There is no more powerful tool for persuasion than 2 people that are really bought into whatever you do, talking about how much they like what you do or who you are in front of somebody that's deciding whether or not you're for real, right? Like, there's no more powerful tool for persuasion for that. And these Zoom calls become that, right? Like these Zoom calls become this moment where you're just doing that stuff at scale. Your community, like your community rooms and stuff like that become that, right? It's just like, how do you systemize that piece? And you just got to be able to have like a magnet that is bringing the people that are totally bought in and also some people that are like partially bought in, and you just got to let them collide.
Yeah. And I think you've been readjusting and pivoting continually is what you keep saying. Cause I've been showing up at some of your sessions. I try to get to everyone, but it just, sometimes it collides with schedules every week.
I get it. You're one of those 25, Deb, right? But like to me, it's such a big ask for you to come that like, I'm always just so grateful anytime you show up. But the other side of that sword is when I invite you to one of these shows, and we talk about this in the boot camp, right? Like my invite to this thing better not be come talk to Pablo. My invite needs to be something where you open your email, like, oh, that Pablo guy, this is something I've been meaning to find out about. He just took something off of my schedule. Like I was able to cross something off my list by accepting this invite to this because I needed to find out about this anyways. And it's that like real perspective of service of like, what can I put in front of you that is valuable to you that moment that's going to make you want to show up? If not, it doesn't happen, right? Like you got to lead with service.
Yeah. I'm interested to know. I don't know if Missy has any questions or Isar wants to chime in. And so I'll definitely open up the floor. But I wanted to just ask, I know you're going to CMX next week. So we're recording this on September 9th. The CMX event is in San Francisco. It's a big community leadership. It's like the community event, right? And they haven't had one in person, I believe, since 2019 I can't remember when the last one was. Tell us about it. What are you excited about for CMX?
Man, I'm excited. So this whole thing that I just said about content creators, I can't wait to be in a room full of community people. Like I've never experienced that. The closest thing that I've ever gotten to experiencing that was their virtual event that I spoke at last year. And even in virtual, you just got this feeling, right? Like the chat in that virtual event is the most lively, most supportive, most like virtual hug chat I've ever been a part of. So I can't wait to be in person with all these people that are so community minded and just nerd out about it. And, it's like that kind of video meme of like Chris Farley that was going on during the pandemic, was just like running up and down the hallway, like some aisles, like hugging people frantically. I think that's what it's going to be. And I literally can't wait. So it's in Redwood City, California. Like you said, CMX has built the platform and evangelized the thing. Is this guy, David Spinks, that wrote the book, Business of Belonging, that founded it. They've really championed this community thing and have created the stage for community. And it's in Silicon Valley. I'm really, really excited about the whole thing, right? It's allowed me to set up some really interesting meetings because I'm in that Bay Area of people I really, really admire that I've had on my podcast that I now get to meet in person. Plus I get to go be part of this whole thing. But I guess the easiest way to describe it is like, this is where community managers and people that think about community all day long collide with leaders of industry that are wondering whether or not this thing is for them. And I just think that type of watering hole is very crucial to any ecosystem. So very excited for it.
Yeah, it's so cool. So I had gotten on a call with you during your show earlier this year. You had a session with Pamela Slim, who wrote the book that we're currently now reading in our book study. And she talks about watering holes and all of those things. So that term I can attribute back to Pamela Slim, since 100%. We just recently talked about that. And I want to just say, yeah, it's great to be in a room. When I was at Clicks, I'm sorry that I can't go to CMX, but when I was at the Community Leaders Institute event, it was just phenomenal, because it was just community leader, people who are doing the work of building an online community, whatever that role is for you, they are always interested in allowing people to be seen, valued, and heard, because they know those basic things are important. And so when you automatically come into a room with people that automatically want to learn about you and know that they need to offer a space for you, as well as they know that they can be seen, it's just an amazing room to be in, when you know you're kind of all in that like charge of, we're all in this thing together, this community journey, whatever we're struggling with right now, like I got your back. It's kind of that thing. And it's really amazing. Isar, you had your hand raised. Did you want to chime in?
I do. I just want to say something about what you just said in connection to everything that Pablo shared, which is obviously brilliant. In CMX, everybody's going to be like that. But in most places, it's not. And if you come in as that person, if you are that person that gives other people the stage, that elevates the people around them, that attracts everybody else to you because you're the one doing it, that's how you win. And that's everything that Pablo was talking about are tools of tactics to do exactly what you just said, right? Is how do you become the person that makes everybody feel special, that gives a stage to everybody, that elevates everybody around them. And if it's not CMX, you're going to be it. And it makes you very, very unique versus the guy shouting as loud as possible. So that's kind of like combining it all together.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the challenge that I'm seeing, that we're kind of seeing right now, is around monetization and funding, because the Community Leaders Institute got bought out by another company, and they've now hired a consultant. And I've seen several positions change in community leadership, community roles in the last 2 weeks. And so, because it's been so top of mind for me, I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are. Anybody who's in the room here, Pablo, Missy, or Isar, about, how do we not just prove the value of a community to an organization, but to society? Because I think we're at a place where people get it in a sense of, I know I need a community. It's definitely a high priority for me. I need to be in certain communities for certain purpose, right? They ultimately know why it's important, but putting a dollar amount on that and saying, this is, okay, yes, we need community, and here's the investment that we're willing to make, or here's the investment that, here's the amount of money to make this possible, because at the end of the day, everything costs something. And so even, having these people, building these relationships, building the operations behind it, doing all of those things, a community, a new organization might say, oh, we need community, but then they don't even know why they need community. And then they don't know what's involved in it. And then they want it to happen like in 6 seconds. And then if they don't get it instantly, then what happens? We don't even know. But it's just an interesting, because one of the things I talked to RD about recently in this conversation was people get community, but they don't get why they need to put dollars to it. And I think it's not just for organizations, it's across the board. I feel like society needs to understand that this costs money. Even Meetup, I read through Pablo, one more thing, through Pablo's call, I met the CEO of Meetup, David Siegel, and he was on it. I just finished his book. I read that book in a week, because it was so interesting, because it talked about not really community, but it talked about culture, and it talked about transitioning, and like really the things that actually happen in conversations with these big organizations that you're like, I never would have thought that would be an issue, and these are the issues that are happening, and like the decisions that he had to make massively impacted hundreds of employees, of layoffs, and all of these things that like have a ripple effect down. And so one of the big controversies was charging for instead of switching the format from charging for the host to be able to have the ability to host a community on their Meetup platform, instead of charging the host, saying, actually, the host really should get some money, but if we can't pay them, we would charge the people participating. And they're changing that model. And so that socially is kind of addressing the fact that we need to invest in this. But I'll stop talking now. Give me your thoughts. Pablo, what are your thoughts there about financial investment with community?
There's two things to unpack. I'll start with like last first, and then get to the community conversation. Yeah. The more I do business, the more I attribute value and importance to how much the business model, the packaging of the offer, and how it's delivered, like when benefits are delivered, how they're delivered, and what the structure of the price point of it affects the overall health of a business, right? So the idea that Meetup changes from, do we charge organizers versus do we charge per individual and all these things, for the entrepreneur that is listening to us right now, really look hard at that, right? Like we recently had to reconfigure our thing. And I think this will be a perfect segue, right? Like early on, right? Like I've been punching at this community thing for like 8 years. And early 2019 was when I really got the language of community creation for business development and all these things. And I've been really trying to sell it for since then as that. And I got really good advice early in that journey. And it was that you got to solve a Monday morning problem. And while people believe that community is awesome and they want one, it's generally not the thing that is keeping them up at night, that they show up, that's not the thing that gives them the Sunday scaries, lack of community, right? Something else. There's a more immediate concern that is making them anxious on Sunday night that they got to go solve on Monday morning. So within that, the offer had to become something that solves that on the front end, that can lead to community on the back end. And I really believe that is the way that this stuff, there is certain, scale at which community can pay off quicker or not, but community is a slow burn, right? Like, hey, SEO does it. Nobody's buying SEO thinking that it's going to work tomorrow. It's going to work in 9 months, and people are paying extraordinary amounts because they've proven the value, right? Now, can you also, as an SEO company, show up and be like, well, we're also going to do all this other stuff that's going to help you, like on your website, to convert quicker and blah, 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 so that you get the benefit quicker to make those 9 months better. That's how we have to think as community strategists. And overall, the answer is the community industry needs to be speaking in terms of cost of client acquisition, in terms of pipeline velocity, in terms of lifetime value, and in terms of average initial contract price. Right? Because what you're going to do is when we start to value community, what's going to happen is we're going to benchmark before and after a community. And then you're going to look at people that have been influenced by the community, that have had a touch point with the community, and segment that and compare that to the rest of your clientele base. And what you're going to find is lower cost of client acquisition. You're going to find higher average initial price point. You're going to find higher pipeline velocity from the moment they know you to the moment they do business with you, time to cash flowing, and you're going to find higher lifetime value. And those things are what's going to prove whether your concept is working or not. And that's where we got to be. And Deb, it brings me back to my first business that I ever launched was a green building consulting company. And early in the days of green building consulting, I had to speak very much in terms of building performance. It was, you're going to save this much on energy, this much in heating and cooling, this much in lighting, and your people are going to be this much more comfortable, right? Like you're going to have less maintenance and these kinds of things until green building tipped with this like certification. And then after the market was educated on how this was good, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted it, now developers were coming in like, well, I just want this like LEED certification, make it happen. You're like, cool. Now I can just sell green, right? The same thing needs to happen with community. People need to get educated on the value of it until enough people adopt it, where it's just like, well, the person next door has a community, so I just have to have it. And at that point, we're going to be able to just sell community, right? At that point, we're going to be able to sell SEO. Sure, your competitor has one, you need one. In about 9 months, you're going to see results. But because you need one, let's go, pal. We're just not there yet, right? Like we need to be speaking in terms of these things. And the way that we reverse engineered the model on the offer is, yes, you want community. You're going to have community. But you know what you really want? You really want to meet certain people, and you really want to have like this content that you can use all across your go-to-market channels, and all that stuff's a giant headache. I can take that headache away. And while I'm taking that headache away, community's coming, buddy. Right? So like that's how we sell it. And that to me is where the conversation needs to go.
Pretty cool. Isar, I saw you had a comment. I have lots to say, but I'm going to toss it over to Isar because I feel like you've got some good stuff.
I just want to add one thing, and I'll and you need to tell me if shameless plugs are okay or not, but they're okay. Okay. So one of the interviews that I've done recently, and that I think is coming out either next or one after that on my podcast, is with another guy we met at Clicks. His name is Danny Weinstein, and he is now the director for community at SAP. So a big role, but he's done this at that league in other different places. And we talk about the buckets of where there's business impact to community. And some of the things is what Pablo talks about, which is the income of money, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to make more money because 1, 2, 3, lower cost of acquisition, higher lifetime value, and so on. But he also talks about a lot of back-end stuff. So the first thing he talks about, and again, he did this and doing this in very large organizations where it's very easy to measure because you have all the data on the planet. So one of them is customer support. So think about how many things that break today for you. Oh, I don't know how to set up my alarm on my iPhone in the new version. You're not going to open a support ticket for Apple. You're going to go on a support forum. There's going to be 50 people asking you a question. There's going to be 300 people replying with videos from the community telling you how to solve the problem. That reduces the amount of support people you need for Apple in order to support iPhone. So a huge saving is on the customer service side if you learn how to leverage your community to solve some of the common problems of the service or product that you have. So that's one bucket he talks about. Another bucket that he talks about is the quote unquote technical content. So not the content Pablo and I refer to, but more like product content. So how-to stuff, a lot of it that is now in the formal documentation of the company is generated by the users. It's just integrated into the overall documentation of the company. And the third thing that he talks about that, again, is probably in bigger companies, but it really can influence smaller companies as well, is product and service roadmap. Like, what's the next thing you're going to offer? And that saves you a hell of a lot of money and makes it all more accurate. Because what did companies do so far? They did surveys. Surveys cost shitloads of money, and they're very limited with a reach. Like, you got to address those 25 people that presumably represent the audience that you're trying to target, versus I have 200 people in my community, but they are my target audience. They are my real customers. And they can tell you what they're missing and what they want to see and what other products that they're using does that they have to use in order to complement yours. So all these aspects are huge dollar savings that companies can save if they had community, in addition to the benefit in additional revenue.
So the tricky part in that is the idea, and I think that language is excellent, and it works for a part of the market, and it'll work for a certain amount of time, right? Like, again, shameless plug alert. In my show, we had Venya Logan. I think you might have been there for that one, Deb. The Venya show. One of the headiest community conversations I've ever had. But she talks about this idea that, on the support side, on the cost saving side, once you reach a level of like homeostasis on the cost saving side, then it just becomes the norm and they stop valuing it, right? So like the support ticket side, once all those support tickets are gone, then it's taken for granted, right? Because that's our psychology. It just no longer exists. So what do we do? Kind of like the same way that when the government is cutting costs, they think, well, why don't we just stop maintenance on bridges? That the bridges are fine, like that type of stuff. So I agree that is a major benefit. The product roadmap stuff, major benefit, right? Like we talk about this all the time, the three of us, how feedback loop is such an underrated piece of community. And then the customer service reduction, underrated piece of community. I just think in the long run, if we're not talking about revenue generation, people are going to go to sleep at some point. Like at first it's like, yeah, we reduced the customer service tickets. That's awesome. We're going to be super pumped about it. But Q3, you forgot about that stuff, right? Like you're like, well, that's already done. So what's it doing for me now? So human beings act in their own best interest and in the most immediate things possible, right? So we really need to get to this point where we are framing this conversation as business growth, right? Isar, you say it perfectly. A business is a function of cost of client acquisition plus cost of operations has to be less than or equal to lifetime value. And out of all the things that you can do in marketing and whatever, like and sales and operations, the only thing that drives down cost of client acquisition and increases lifetime value while keeping operations constant is word of mouth velocity, right? Like that stuff scales. If you just have a bunch of people talking about you without you having to work, doesn't cost you a dime. So how can you inject that into the conversation? That is community building for business development. And those are the metrics, right? Like you told me that early on, and I haven't found anything better to describe it, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's great shares. And I think I will just put in some 2 cents around the difference between people trying to prove an ROI on business for community and trying to prove the ROI on why we need it in life.
Mm, mm.
And I think a lot of the space of where I'm at, the book I'm writing right now is Creator to Community Builder. And
Awesome.
I've been talking with people. I've talked with over 85 community leaders. I've, ventured into this space for 2 years and struggled and loved it and trying to figure it out, navigate like, well, how am I going to do this, but still get paid to do this? And like, can I still do this? And I think what it comes down to, or the community builders that I see that are really successful in the creator space are doing, is what you're talking about by solving a problem, but it's a problem that's like the people are waking up, but it's maybe not a business problem, right? Maybe
Correct.
it's a physical problem. Like I'm just physically not feeling well and I don't know why. And I need to find a community that now I've been diagnosed with something. And is there a community out there to help me? Yes, there actually is a community out there for these really even unique, physical and diagnosis issues of that people have to deal with their whole life. And in past, they've had to deal with it alone. And now there's actually communities that offer this kind of support. And I think that's valuable and it's worth paying for. And I've been in communities where they've helped me transform massively. And I think it's an invaluable thing, but I think it's hard to put dollars on that and then to market and sell it as that. I think humans are just like, but like you're saying, well, but how does this really relate to my bank account?
And so you're saying from the consumer level, it's hard to quantify.
Yeah. So how are we teaching people, right? How are we teaching people that this online community space that I'm creating for you to help you solve your anxiety or your health problems or your relationship problem? Maybe you don't even know where to start with relationships, or you're trying to date and like all that's offering the dating scene right now is, virtual dating, and that's who wants to do that anymore. And, how do we build authentic relationships if they don't exist in our physical space? If I live in a community where I don't align with most of the people in my community, I seek virtual communities. And that's where I spend a lot of my time personally, because I don't have an in-person community in my physical space in Pennsylvania where I live that really connects or aligns with me. I would pay money to be a part of that. I don't know that a lot of people would. And I think that's the challenge that we face right now, is the societal community price tag and why it's valuable.
That's a really, I swear, Deb, in all my pontification about community, I've never thought about that problem, right? Like I guess my head always goes to, how can I get someone else to fit the bill, right? Well, like, which is why I've been so concentrated on this whole like B2B motion of convincing companies that they need to build it because it has these other benefits, right? Like while I 100% agree with you that it is worthwhile as an individual to pay for community because there's no greater value, right? You know my origin story, right? Like I'm born and raised Catholic since I'm like 14. I have these issues with the Catholic Church. But when my brother passed away and 1,200 people showed up to his funeral, I looked around and I go, oh, I get what I'm getting here. It's not this whole like religious doctrine. It's a community and I can never, ever leave it. But with that in mind, I think as humans, we have been taught that community is free, right? Like the same way that it's really hard for someone to convince someone that they need to pay for your podcast because they believe podcasts are free, but yes, can you make a podcast that is worth paying for? 100%. It's just an uphill battle because society is conditioned that community is free. So I think it really comes down to what we just spoke about, the offer, right? Like it has to, if you are charging for an individual to pay for a community, how do you solve their biggest problem immediately the moment that they join so that they are just like, okay, cool. So what else can they solve for me for a lower price on the back end, right? Like the idea of like, that's why we launched our bootcamp, right? Or why we changed that service. Because it's like, I can convince you to come to my shows if I can sell you something that solves a problem for you and prove to you that I have a bunch of great ideas, then you're going to make time to show up to my show, right? Like, but I had to deliver everything that I have learned for the last 12 years to you first on the front end for you to then be like, all right, then I want to know what you're thinking about from Monday to Friday.
Right. I think courses or structured programs are much easier to sell in the beginning of a community builder's journey.
Yeah.
Just getting a small cohort together of 9 or 10 people and just being like, let's meet, and then to find the frequency, let's meet every week at 4:00 and let's talk and do this thing for 4 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
People can grasp it, know that it's going to end. And then they're like, yeah, sign me up for this time. And that's what I dedicate in my schedule. I think it's a harder sell to say then, well, keep meeting with us every week for the rest of your life. That's a lot of, that's a huge major commitment. So you really have to show. And what happens is in those 4 weeks, let's say, or the however long your program is, you build the relationships with those people. And with the powerful thing about community is once they've built those relationships, they'll keep coming back. Correct. And that's what you're seeing with the turnover on the show. Like you're constantly having people come back around again. Correct. We're getting up with time, and I know we're running into time here, and I could talk with you all day. Tell everybody where's the best place to connect with you if they're listening to this podcast.
Yeah. So first place that you can connect with me is go leave a review on Deb's show. Deb puts a ton of work on this. Like, go do a 5-star review. It takes you no time. It's a no cost thing. Like, just hit 5 stars, spend 15 seconds writing a description, but if not, just hit 5 stars, maybe even share it, right? Like, I know that Deb does a lot here, a lot of value. Like, connect with her first and help her get the word out about this. If you want to connect with me, I have a show too. I would love to have you there, right? The B2B Community Builders Show is my podcast. I'd love to see you there. If you click into that, then you're going to see that I do them live every single week. So if what we're talking about is cool and you want to be a part of it, come join us live, because I desperately want to be your friend. So, the other thing, which I think is another one of these like nuggets I like to give to people. My name is Pablo Gonzalez, right? So it's like, it's impossible to rank for the John Smith of people that have 6 kids and name them all after themselves. So what I have found is that if you look up Pablo Gonzalez on Apple Music, on Apple, podcast, or on Spotify, I come up like in one of like the top 1 to 3 search results. So it's just a really powerful thing. Like, I think you can put in Pablo Gonzalez with a Z at the end and you'll find me, but I just find it fascinating that the audio space, the stuff that we're doing, right, putting out podcasts, is this like really fertile ground to make a name for yourself when you can't Google Pablo Gonzalez, you can't LinkedIn Pablo Gonzalez or Facebook Pablo Gonzalez ever find me. So for those of you that are very relationship driven and want to, build a brand, like having a podcast with your name on it that you do every single week, like you can still go get like, primetime real estate in audio world, which is only growing. So I just want to give people that idea.
I love that. Brilliant. Very good. And yeah, the Community Builder Show is amazing. B2B Community Builder Show on Mondays at 4:30. So definitely if you're able to join us. And then you have a special strategy session. So you do a bonus round after you interview somebody. You actually have a strategy session afterwards to like workshop our community challenges or what we're facing right now as community professionals. And I think that is such a valuable time. And so if anybody's like, man, I wish I had somebody to talk to, come to Pablo's show. I'm sure he'll love to share his stage with you for a few minutes and talk with you about whatever is going on, because that's the kind of person he is. And he's also very amazing at karaoke. So if you do get a chance to ever hang out with Pablo and he mentions karaoke, make sure you go. Like,
for the record, not a good singer, but amazing at karaoke.
And especially, do you do any other than one song? Is this your go-to song?
I do. I do. I got a lot of songs that I can act like a jackass in, but the one that I am best at being a clown at is Total Eclipse of the Heart. So I always like to start with that, because then I win the room and then I get artistic license to go sing Lion King or Notorious B.I.G. or whatever else I got to do.
All right. So cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Pablo, for joining us today. For everybody listening, thank you again. Please rate and review our show, as Pablo mentioned. And Thanks for coming. I hope you have a lovely day, afternoon, evening. I hope you're finding calm anywhere that you are today. Take care. Until next time. See you later. Bye. Hey, this is Deb Shell, and I am so psyched to let you know I am writing a book. Big deal. I know. Maybe it's not for you, but for me, it's a big deal. And guess what? I'm writing this book for you because honestly, as a new community builder 2 years ago in 2020, I had no idea what I was doing, and I really got confused easily. So I'm going to simplify things for you. But what I need from you right now is to actually help me make this book possible. And so you can support me with a crowdfunding campaign that I'm running through iFundWoman. I'm going to have a link in the show notes. Please support me. This is running from September 1st through the end of October. So I'm really hoping to reach my goal to be able to write this work style book. It's going to have worksheets. It's going to have templates. It's going to be something that you can actually use today. It's not a course that you have to take for 4 weeks. It's not a big book that's not going to give you actionable steps. You're going to be able to take action the same day that you read the book. I'm super excited about this. I've had lots of feedback from clients that this is what they want, this is what they need. So I'm putting it together, and I hope you can support me with it, and I hope it's going to help you. So let me know. Please check out the show notes for that link to the iFundWoman crowdfunding campaign for the new book I'm writing. It's called Creator to Community Builder. I'm so excited. Thanks for helping me if you've already donated.